This is Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Gloria Negrete McLeoad. She is a member of the United States Congress. Again, congratulations on joining that august body. You've been there for about 3-4 months now. How's it going?
Well, it's certainly very different than the state legislature. It's going fine.
Right. I mean, when you were in Sacramento, both in the Assembly and the Senate, you were part of significant majorities.
I like to say I was a big fish in a small pot. Now I'm a minnow in a very big pot.
I was going to say, but how is it being on the minority side?
Very different. Gives you a different perspective of life.
But you were known in Sacramento as someone that worked across the aisle.
I was.
And so are you able to do that as a member of the minority party working across the aisle?
Well, it's very different. You do not have meetings like you used to have in Sacramento, where you belong to part of a committee, and the committee is not 350 members big. You know, you had a small committee, so you knew your members. Here I'm getting to know the members. The committees have 40 people on them.
I saw that. Which committees are you on again?
I'm on agriculture and veterans.
And both are very large.
Very large. Very, very large.
Let us speak about veterans, because I think about your district, a large number of veterans. You represent Eastern Los Angeles County and would it be Western San Bernardino County? And so you have been interested in veterans for quite some time. And congratulations, you dropped your first bill. It's H.R. 1251. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, the bill is trying to fit a niche where when soldiers come home, veterans come home, that if they want to continue their education, that the universities and the institutions will have some place for them to go to get the services that are provided to them. You know, many times the veterans go to the institutions and they don't know where to go, and so this will provide that. Are we thinking mental health services? No.
What do you think?
Educational services, because many people do not, especially veterans, don't know what they can acquire in as far as veteran service.
So what's this? How are we today in terms of the status quo? I'm trying to get a sense of how will this change and make better.
Well, currently, because you know the state of California cut a whole bunch of programs, and the federal government did too. So this is not going to cost anything. We're going to try to find money.
Oh, really?
Yes, from grants and from other services that perhaps are going away, and so maybe that money can then put into these services.
I have to ask you, speaking of bipartisan relationships, one of your former colleagues, Paul Cook, is now a member of the United States Congress. He had been chair of the Assembly Veterans Affairs Committee. He himself
is a colonel in the Marines.
In the Marines. So is this an example of how you can get together, or is it just so early in the process?
Well, what he did ask me is how much does it cost him?
Exactly.
And so we've struck the money.
And so now what? I mean,
so now in Congress, unlike the state legislature where I could present a bill and I don't need any co-author, I don't need anybody, it's my bill. In Congress, you must have co-authors to show that you have other support of other members.
Regardless of party affiliation.
Yeah.
And so now
I have a whole bunch of co-authors.
Is Paul Cook one of them?
Well, I'm hoping that he'll
We'll have to give him a call and tell him to sign up.
I'm actually trying to get everybody in the Inland Empire to come on so that it could show that we are trying to work together.
But this program would apply nationally?
Yes.
Okay.
To schools across the nation.
And it's community college?
Community colleges and universities that have these outreach programs for veterans returning from war.
And I think about those veterans, especially with the wind down in Afghanistan. I've spoken with, I'm sure you have as well, and it's a challenge to re-enter.
Well, not only in education, but some veterans that are coming home do not even have a place to go to. You know, the Army or the services put you out and said, here you go, bye.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're hopeful this will actually gain traction?
Well, I hope so.
Okay.
I'm very hopeful.
Along those lines, you mentioned that Mr. Cook had asked how much will it cost. I'm sure his concern, your concern, is that right now we're under what's known as the federal sequester. And for our viewers who may not be aware, essentially the federal government is just doing across the board cuts.
Irrespective of they're not being selective.
Yeah, it's, I guess for 2013, 9% cuts for non-defense programs, 13% for defense programs. In 2014, that will change. As we speak today, I don't know that there's been a lot of pain felt, metaphorically speaking.
Because the cuts were not even due to go in until the end of this month.
Exactly.
And so but you know, it'll mean cuts to senior services. It'll mean cut to preschools. In fact, this morning I was at a preschool watching the little kids work on a whiteboard, and they were actually spelling and reading, 4 years old.
And it's interesting you mentioned preschool, because there has been a lot of concern that the sequester directly could impact preschool programs like Head Start.
That's correct.
Which I know has been wildly successful, not as a partisan. And so what's happening along those lines? There's a lot of frustration about the inability of the parties to get together on this issue, because obviously you weren't in Congress at that point, but the goal was to use the sequester as a hammer, not to have it actually go into effect.
Well, the hammer went through the whiteboard.
It's literal,
Yes.
well stated. And so, are there discussions, or has everyone just thrown their hands up and said, "Oh, that's the way it goes"?
Well, I would hope that that's not the way it goes. I think back to when I first got to the legislature in California, and there was an energy crisis, and they said,
Oh, yes.
"Here you go, folks." And now I've gone to Congress, and they said, "Here you go, folks."
Right.
So I think it's up to the two parties to try to work together, come to a conclusion, but of course the president has the ultimate say.
One area where I do think we're starting to feel the pinch of the sequester is in airlines and airports. I have been to a variety of airports, Los Angeles, Burbank, Ontario. I believe you represent Ontario.
That's right.
And the lines are getting quite long. I almost missed a flight as a result. Now, look, you know, inconvenience is one thing, but at the same time, we've also heard safety. You know, certain towers are going down at the smaller airports. So it's one thing to be inconvenienced with a long line. It's another when you're dealing with towers going down, air towers.
And safety extends beyond partisan lines, and everybody should be really aware of that. You know, in my district, Chino Airport, which is a small municipal airport, which no person traffic runs out of there. It's people that put their planes, but still, we're talking about not Burbank, but Pacoima.
Right.
We're talking about Fullerton.
Hawthorne, I think.
Some of the other ones.
And so their towers are going down.
That's what I've heard. And of course, I just hear it.
Right, we hear it the
same place.
But the question is, does that mean if you know that there will be a handoff to another larger airport sooner than would have been?
No, I have not heard that, but I know it's now on the radar of a whole lot of people, especially in Southern California, for all of those small municipal airports.
To the extent that you are aware, can individual fixes be made to the sequester so that, you know, if airport safety becomes an issue, that can be pulled out of the sequester, or does it really need to be a grand bargain, a grand package to resolve the sequester?
You know, that's a good question.
Well, who would have thunk? I actually thought of something that maybe wise.
You know, so I don't really know. The sequester was put there before we came in, and all we did was vote on it. And we didn't vote on the sequester. We voted on extending the sequester.
The debt ceiling.
Yes.
We've heard rumors that, you know, maybe there will be a grand bargain. I know so much of Congress is about seniority, and you know,
it's above my pay grade.
You know.
They haven't included me yet.
So what does that look like? How do you kind of, is it just the number of years of service? Is it really that basic?
It seems to be a much more seniority based process. You know, California, if you're there and you're sharp enough and you can get quickly up, move up. But this is really a seniority, and so I don't know. Is that a time to change?
Well, I mean,
you know, this class that came in was it was 89 people.
And that's
a quarter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's close to a quarter of the entire 435. Have you gotten to know your fellow freshmen? I mean, is there an opportunity?
My fellow freshmen, yes. But, you know, 435, every time I go into a committee here, I say, did I see that person
Do I know him? Do I know
see that
her?
person
Right.
before? Yeah.
In the lottery for offices?
I was 43, so I was right in the middle.
Okay, so how'd you do?
I did fine. I have a nice office, and of course I fixed it with all of my pictures that I had in Sacramento. And people come in, and the people that were there before, the congressman that was there before, his staff came in to look at the office.
That's nice.
And they said, "You've done more in 2 months than we did in 2 years."
Her name is Gloria Negrete, McLeoad, member of the U.S. Congress. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
In 2013, how many Latinos are serving in the United States Congress? 13, 22, 28, or 34. In 2013, a record 28 Hispanics are serving in the United States House of Representatives.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Jacque Robinson, she is a member of the Pasadena City Council, and one of your newest members is John Kennedy, no?
Yes, yes. We just had a recent election.
So now we have Jacque Robinson, John Kennedy. Is Marilyn Monroe next?
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
I was going to say.
Name recognition definitely helps.
It absolutely helps. I want to congratulate you. You were recently appointed to the Burbank Airport Authority.
Yes.
Of course, we all know Bob Hope Airport. What does that mean?
Well, the authority is run by the three cities, Pasadena, Glendale, Burbank, and I'm one of three members on the city council in Pasadena. I replaced Chris Holden, who's now in our assembly.
Right.
So it's been a very eye-opening experience,
can
and I'm getting to
imagine.
know all the players in the industry.
And let's talk about airports, because we have heard recently in the Southern California region that certain smaller airports, their air traffic control towers are going down.
Yes.
Because of the federal sequester. I understand that you were recently in Washington, D.C., and the sequester was on the top of everyone's mind. What can you tell us about your visit?
Well, the airport conference in Washington, D.C., as you mentioned, the sequester was on the top of everyone's minds, and the towers specifically because those are the towers that are mostly at the smaller airports.
Right.
Luckily for us in Burbank, we're not affected right now so much by the sequester because we don't have contracted out air traffic controllers. And so
Explain that.
some smaller airports, they contract out their air traffic controllers.
To whom?
To outside contractors.
Okay.
For us, our traffic controllers are FAA
I see.
collective bargaining members, and so the sequester doesn't affect us right now. We do anticipate seeing longer security lines, of course, but we haven't necessarily gotten the brunt of the initial effects of the sequester.
I have to tell you, I have flown out of LAX recently. I have flown out of Burbank. Some colleagues have flown out of Ontario, and they have absolutely noticed, and I have absolutely noticed, longer lines to the extent I almost missed a flight.
Most definitely at the larger airports such as LAX, but again, for right now, Burbank has been, in most parts, unaffected right now. We do have some longer lines as well, but.
So is there a fear that airports like Burbank, Long Beach, Sacramento, Los Angeles, that they could be impacted by the sequester later on in terms of decreasing the number of air traffic controllers or workers on the tarmac?
I mean, definitely small airports are feeling the effects right now because, of course, if you can't have air traffic controllers, that means aren't able to have night flights come in, which affects revenue, and we already know because of the economy, revenues are down at most airports, large and small. And so I think in large part, just as cities are not really feeling the initial brunts right now, I think it's more like a wait and see perspective to see how far the sequester cuts are going to hit people where it really is affecting them. I think right now people aren't really feeling it personally. It's more of a large, big picture discussion.
But with those towers going down, does that mean, for example, that Burbank is getting a handoff sooner because these towers are down at Hawthorne or wherever it may be?
Well, it definitely means that those airports that are able to continue with their normal operations have to assist, the other airports that aren't able to do those nighttime landings and takeoffs, and assist with the pilots and communicating with the people on the ground so that they know and public safety is kept at the highest priority.
Are we concerned about safety, though? I mean, if all of a sudden air towers are down and Burbank is taking handoff sooner or whatever it may be, I don't want to be alarmist, but it does seem a bit troubling.
It's definitely a public safety issue, and there's actually another conference in June with just the small airports, and that's going to be a discussion topic there as well. And I think by then we'll have a better sense of how the smaller airports are dealing with, getting assistance from other airports.
I want to ask you about what we know as marriage equality. As I think you may know, I am a lawyer. I'm sorry, but I am.
I did not know
yes,
that,
I am a
actually.
lawyer. I don't practice anymore, although my license is still active. And I remember when I was in law school, I learned about a case called Loving versus Virginia. And it was a very apropos name, and it was the case that the Supreme Court ruled in 1967 that outlawed miscegenation. In 16 states, there was no interracial marriage. And I remember being so surprised that in my lifetime that there were laws on the books in 16 states preventing people of different races from marrying. Today we are in yet another hotly contested debate surrounding same-sex couples being married. I wonder how history will look at this time, if history will look at this time like I looked at 1967. What's your sense?
Well, I think that if you looked at the Loving case and look at the facts, what the Supreme Court should find now is that the Constitution is the Constitution. It doesn't change. And so whether you're talking about same-sex couples or, interracial marriage, you still guarantee the same basic rights by the Constitution. And so, their actions, they should be overturning the ban.
At the same time, though, there is no doubt that the fevered pitch surrounding this issue is only growing. I think about the protests in connection with Prop 8, both for and against, the protests in front of the United States Supreme Court with the recent hearings on Prop 8 and the Defense of Marriage Act. And I've often said in our program that, here we are sitting in kind of this California bubble where you have very significant majorities currently favoring same-sex marriage. So it's very easy for, if I may say, someone like yourself representing Pasadena to be in favor of this right. And I'm just wondering if we are blinded by our left coast view, that for some people, the Bible is clear. I don't care what the Supreme Court says, I don't care what the president says, it's God's law.
Yes, I think in some respects in California we're shielded because we are a diverse state. I think we tend to be more progressive than the United States as a whole. But again, at the same time, the Constitution is the Constitution. The Bible definitely has a place in our lives, especially, if you're a Christian or, you follow the biblical tenets. But, the Supreme Court and the federal law of the land follows the Constitution. And so I think when you think of it in that respect, that's why it seems like, it should be no question that, same-sex couples should be allowed to be married. And I think even a bigger issue is just the rights that they are denied because they cannot get married. So many of the, public safeguards that are in place related to, benefits, health care are tied to marriage. And if same-sex couples are not able to do so, then in essence they're being denied, rights that other people have the right to.
I want to ask you, if I may, as an African-American woman, an African-American leader in Southern California, we know that rightfully or wrongfully in 2008, a lot of fingers were pointed at the black churches. It's the black churches' fault that Proposition 8 passed, which essentially enshrined the right of a man and a woman to be married, but not people of the same sex. I don't know if you're involved in kind of the black church movement, but what's your sense of that whole question about African Americans who are religious and where they come down on this issue?
Well, I think that you find that question amongst all the faiths. I mean, whether you're talking about Christians or the black church or,
right.
Catholics, have very
Muslims,
strong beliefs
Jews,
in Muslims.
yeah.
Like, I think it's across the board, and a lot of it is rooted in, the Bible and what God says about how we're supposed to live. And, whether or not certain actions are a sin and which ones are not. And, again, we're all human. We all fall short every single day of our lives, at least is what I believe. And, again, speaking to the Constitution, that is the book that we have to follow when we're talking about rights.
But it's interesting because there's no doubt that the marriage equality movement, what I was going to say is, has been reaching out to black churches because, rightfully or wrongfully, we do know that African Americans voted in greater numbers for Prop 8 than were expected. They're voting for Barack Obama in big numbers, but then voted in favor of Prop 8. I
mean, I think everyone acknowledges and realizes that the black vote is a swing vote in many respects. And so you have to be, especially here in California, you have to be a coalition builder no matter what sector that you come from. And I think we also have to remember with regard to the marriage equality question, if we're going to, root it in the Bible. At one point, people were using the Bible to justify slavery and a lot of the other ugliness of our history as a nation. So.
Okay, her name is Jacque Robinson. She is a member of the Pasadena City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
In how many American jurisdictions is same-sex marriage legal? 7, 8, 9, or 10? 10 American jurisdictions will issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Scott Svonkin. He is a member of the Los Angeles Community College District Board. And so I want to speak with you about marriage equality. I wouldn't expect that I'd be speaking with you about marriage equality, but in the wake of the Supreme Court hearing cases relating to same-sex marriage, you are taking a bold step.
I think I'm taking the right step. I'm going to initiate a resolution, and we're going to display the rainbow flag at all of our 9 campuses if I'm successful later this month. I believe that every human being has a right to love whomever they want. And my wife and I, just before we got married, registered as domestic partners to bring attention.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know this.
14 years ago, my wife and I registered as domestic partners in the city of West Hollywood to bring attention to the fact that as heterosexual couples, we could marry or be domestic partners. But if my gay friends that I worked with and family members that I loved couldn't do the same thing.
Did you also get married?
We did. About a month later, we decided, we had planned to get married, but we decided a month before we were getting married to bring attention to the fact that we had options that our gay friends didn't.
Did you get a lot of news surrounding this?
It was.
'Cause I don't remember, yeah, this is a while back.
14 years ago, it was not very common for straight couples to register as in domestic partners or civil union, and it was covered by all the local media in Los Angeles.
So what would you say, though, to those that believe that God has spoken, that the Bible is their law, not the Supreme Court, not the legislature, and that flying a flag in solidarity with gay rights is offensive?
I'd say I'm sorry that they feel that way, but I believe that we should respect every human life. And I believe that whether you're gay or straight, that people who love each other should be allowed to marry. I don't think that just because we disagree that we need to fight over things like showing respect for marriage equality or for respect for people that are different.
I just spoke with Jacque Robinson, who's a member of, she's a baseball player, but not that one. She's a member of the Pasadena City Council. And I mentioned to her that I am a lawyer, and I remember learning about the Supreme Court case Loving versus Virginia, and that was the case that invalidated miscegenation laws, interracial marriage laws.
Right.
And I was so surprised that in my lifetime there were laws like that on the books. What do you think people will say in 50 years
I don't
about marriage
think
equality?
I think it'll just, in a few years, my children don't understand it. I have a 12-year-old daughter who asks me, why, Daddy, do people that love each other, why can't they marry? My wife and I hosted in our backyard a few years ago a commitment ceremony of 2 women who loved each other and were family friends.
But they're civil unions. I mean, isn't that good enough?
I think making someone less than isn't American.
Is it less than?
Yes.
A civil union?
Yeah,
How?
it is. Because I think if you love somebody and you want to marry them and be with them forever, you should be entitled to the same rights.
But in California, they are.
With Prop 8, the passage of Prop 8,
Right.
they're not.
But they have all the same benefits, correct?
I think that the Supreme Court hopefully will rule that in this country, like many other countries, people should not be judged based on their sexual orientation, their race, their religion, that they should be judged based on who they are and not, we shouldn't tell people who they can love. I have to tell you, as someone who grew up in the Jewish community, I've studied over my life about discrimination, and I think it's my obligation, both as an elected official and as someone that's Jewish of faith, that I need to support equality for everybody.
Okay, let's shift gears. It's a tricky segue, but I do want to talk about the community college system. As you may know, the system has been under assault for many years as it relates to funding crises.
Yeah.
We've spoken before, but I want to kind of get an update on Prop 30.
Right.
Prop 30 did provide additional funding to community colleges. The governor is also proposing more funding for community colleges. What can you tell us about the state of community colleges today?
Well, the good news is that the Los Angeles Community College District should have summer school at a number of our campuses this year. Many campuses had canceled summer school in the past.
There was actually a report that came out by the Public Policy Institute of California, and they mentioned that I think 60% of community colleges had either canceled or all but canceled summer school.
Right. Because of Prop 30 and $9 million that I just led the effort to authorize in LA, we're going to have more campuses open with classes for summer school, and we're going to begin to expand class offerings for the first time in over 5 years.
And that's another issue. We know that system-wide course sections were down as much as 20%.
Yeah.
Are you going to start adding back sections, especially for those classes that are required to receive an associate's and/or matriculate?
Absolutely. Our number one priority is to help people graduate or get jobs. And so the core classes are the ones that we're going to try to replace first, to bring back first. And so we have funded at least 1,500 new classes that, because of Prop 30 and the release of $9 million in some of our reserve money, we decided to take our reserve down from 12.5% to 10%, which is very healthy compared to almost any district in the state. Because the fact is we're hopeful that the economy is beginning to recover, and so we don't need to keep as large a reserve. We want to invest in classes because our job is to serve students.
I want to ask you about a bill that's been proposed by Das Williams. He's an assembly member out of Santa Barbara. It's being sponsored by Long Beach Community College District, and it would be a bill that would allow districts, I think Long Beach would be the pilot program, but be that as it may, to have intersession classes and to charge
Any price.
a higher price.
Right.
Long Beach is proposing the non-resident price.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, the Los Angeles Community College District's opposing that bill.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason being is that we believe community colleges should be open for all. It's the great equalizer. We should not auction off seats to the highest bidder. We should have people come to our colleges and go through the programs and the system, have equal access.
What would you say, though, to those that would argue, look, we still have sections that are not being offered, and if this student could, for example, pay a little bit more just to get this one class intercession, they won't have to stay a whole other year before that class is offered again. So in effect, it becomes an equalizer because they're saving money and graduating sooner.
Allowing people to pay more to get a seat isn't quite the democratic community college open access to all. I think that if the bill allowed, in my opinion, for students that can afford to get a seat and open up seats for others, that might be more palatable to me.
Could it not open seats for others because they'll be taking the intercession class and not clogging the class in the fall and spring?
It's possible, but unlikely, because the fact is that we have a huge number of people waiting to get in, and this just allows those with the means to get in first.
But there are arguably scholarship opportunities under this bill. Some.
They've talked about having some.
Or grants.
Yeah, they've talked about having some. I believe, and have proposed in Los Angeles and talked about it a lot, that if we invite more international students, for every 5 international students that come to our schools, we can open 25 seats.
Really?
And if things like that would occur in a bill like this, I would be open to looking at it, because my goal is to have more seats for people that live and go to school in our communities, and anything that gets us to that goal is something I'm interested in trying.
Do you know where other districts are coming down? PCC or GCC? Do you know?
I don't. The bill's very new. It's new in the legislation, in the legislative session. It's early. We just voted on it last week to oppose it as
What
a
was the
district.
vote?
It was unanimous.
Really?
Yeah.
Even though one of your sister districts is such a big supporter of it.
Yeah. The good news is that in Los Angeles there's a divergence of opinion, and keeping college affordable and accessible to everybody is the number one priority I have. It's a creative idea, and we need to look at all creative ideas, but allowing people to pay more and giving people with more money is
okay. Hey, Scott Svonkin, I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.